grew up near Seattle. And when I shared this fact with folks when I lived in the Midwest, they often first responded with, "Wow, doesn't it rain a lot there?" And I kind of rolled my eyes in my mind. And I said, well, actually, the average rainfall at SeaTac Airport is less than an inch more than the average rainfall at Kansas City International Airport. And they would go, "What?" And I would explain to them about how misting rain is much better than deluge rain, but it does seem like it rains more even though it doesn't. But that's not really the point, because today's about dancing in the rain. Or as the chapter is titled in the book we're doing, Living Originally, Dancing with Chaos. Doesn't that sound fun? And dancing in chaos is one of those tools for occasional use that Roberts writes about in this book. And just to review, our everyday tools we use every day, all the time, are radical self-awareness, deep self-acceptance, unlimited forgiveness, universal benevolence, and compassionate communication. So we use those all the time, and then this is one of the use-as-needed tools. Now, I told you about the rain in Washington because that's something I've always loved about Washingtonians and now Alaskans, is that for the most part, we do what we want regardless of the weather. Because if you waited for a good sunny day, you would be waiting a long time, and we have better things to do. Heck, we throw an outdoor party where there's snow and it's trucked in the middle of the winter, and it goes on for 2 weeks. That's just a thing we do. So maybe for most of us, that has become our nature. We roll with it, whatever comes. What shows up, we don't think of a situation being something to overcome. And this is wonderful because this is a great skill. This is like a base skill. So we're using it just in our everyday, like, I need to go to the grocery store, who cares if it snowed 6 inches thing, which is great. But how do we apply that skill from like kind of a basic needs level to the next level? And last week, for those of you who were here, those of you who want, here's a quick review. We talked about to consider the uncomfortable question of ideas and places that might be hiding out in your subconscious that are not in alignment with your values. Or thoughts that might, you go, oh, that was, I don't believe that in my heart, but it popped in my head anyway. Now, of course, the first step is to not act on those things, which I think probably most of us are pretty good at doing, but to look at those things and go deeper and ask the questions and be willing to confront that, heal, change, ask the questions. And of course, when we do this, when we become vulnerable at that level to ourselves, it can sometimes be disorienting. But what we also know is that if we've experienced any kind of grief or loss or just challenges in our lives, we know that these things cannot often be tied up neatly in a little box and set aside. Okay, now I'm done with that challenge, or I'm done with that grief or that transition, and now I'm on to the next thing. It's great, it's finished, tied up nice in a bow. That's not how it works, right? And these things, some of them will be things that walk alongside of us for a lifetime, and maybe they'll fade, but they will walk alongside of us for a while. They'll be a companion along the road. But you know, our ego is funny. It doesn't like uncertainty or change or the possibility of looking foolish. I don't know about you, but I have a response that is not conscious response to like, oh no, I don't want to look foolish. I mean, like goofing around, yes, but like not understanding something, no. So we're funny like that. So because we don't like often to feel that uncomfortableness or uncertainty or not looking like we know what's going on, we often try to minimize the risk or gloss over the unpretty things or even form lifelong habits to counterbalance that. They may have served us at some time, people come up with all sorts of coping mechanisms when they're kids to deal with their situation, but then they keep those coping mechanisms long after that they're helpful or useful. But change is uncomfortable. We know this. We talk about it all the time because that's what life is. We want it to stay the same, but it never is. And it's hard to look at our mistakes. You may look at, as I do, at the headlines any day, pick a day, this year, 5 years ago, whatever, and you go, what? However, I do not lack hope or conviction. First of all, I know that if you actually look at the statistics, we are living a more peaceful time than ever before. But that does not sell newspapers. And there is a lot of junky things going on. I am sad. I see people hurting each other with words and physically, and it breaks my heart because I don't know whether it's because I'm a person of faith or whatever, but I believe that people are all one family. We all should get along, and so I think it's just absurd, but that is what's happening. And so when I see all this stuff, I go, oh, yes, we're in that chaos of a birthing chamber. Unity author Emily Cady wrote about the process of chemicalization. I know some of you know about chemicalization. It's something we say with a smile because it's not comfortable. And chemicalization is this great word that simply means that friction that happens when I'm going to do the new thing. I've got a new consciousness. I've got new ideas. This is where I'm going and who I want to be. And the old way of being saying, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And it kind of pulls back and throws some last minute lassos around you and is trying to pull you back, and you're like, no, but this is who I want to be. And that's chemicalization, is that struggle. But here's the great thing, is that the part that's holding you back never wins in chemicalization. The who you are coming here to be always happens. It just sometimes happens more fast than others. Chemicalization, man. It's an interesting... But when we know that's what's happening, it makes things a lot easier. Instead of going, why am I not feeling well? What's going on with me? I was supposed to be all enlightened now, and now I'm feeling like I'm acting like a jerk, and I don't know what's going on. You're in the process of becoming. It's okay. I was thinking about, a kid who's like, when they decide that they don't need mom or dad to tuck them in anymore. I'm all grown up now. I don't need a da-da-da-da. But then there's a thunderstorm or there's something, and it's like, can you tuck me in? Right? But there's that part of that growth. And that's sort of the same thing that happens to us as we continue to evolve and we have new ideas and grow. We never arrive at the destination of enlightenment. We just keep inching our way towards it. Right? And this growth process doesn't happen just within ourselves and our individual consciousnesses, but it's something that happens in our community and global consciousness. That's a big word. As well. It's, we've talked about the collective consciousness, like we have a consciousness as a church community, and we have a consciousness as a neighborhood, and we have a consciousness as a state and as a city and as a country and a region and all those, there's all sorts of little bubbles that we belong to. And each one of those has its own little set of understanding and beliefs and consciousnesses, and those things continue to evolve and grow. And growth is happening. I don't know if you saw in the paper this week, I saw that the most diverse neighborhood in the country is here in Anchorage. Pretty exciting, I thought. Not a surprise, because I knew that about how we had a very diverse school district, so that sort of makes sense. And on Friday, I went to a service where our local political and religious leaders are calling for Alaska to be a model of inclusiveness and tolerance in our country. That's exciting to me. That's where we're saying we're going to be the shift here. We're making it happen. It doesn't mean that there won't be bumps along the road, but, you know, in the midst of this chaos, we're coming together to do something. Chaos can be good. Chaos tears down what was to create what is going to be, but the part in the middle is pretty ugly. Look at my office. Don't look at my office. And so I have no doubt that, like the mythical phoenix, we as individuals and we as a community and as a country and as a world will rise out of this situation. The phoenix, remember, has to be destroyed, has to burn for a new thing to be created. I wore my peacock feather today because there's a lot of mythology around peacocks as well. And one is that every year their feathers come back more brilliant and beautiful than they were the year before. And I think that there's something really helpful to remember in that each time we come back better than the time before. And so there's, just like there's no arriving in enlightenment, there's no timeline for how long it takes for change to happen. You know, we always want it to happen now so we can get into our new comfort zone and cruise along there, right? That would be way better. Not how it works. But we all get our part to play in how rapidly the change happens. And that comes back to our own responsibility in our own little world, in our own little mind. What's going on in there? Is there things that I need to clear up? Is there this chaos that is not a creative chaos? So there's a creative chaos and not so helpful chaos, right? So we have the creative chaos of, you know, like taking down what's not working so we can build something new, and being curious about what is there to emerge. And then there's sort of, we can get caught up in going, oh, well, we're just in the chaos and that's just okay and we're just going to stay there because that becomes our new comfort place. Or because you get a juice out of not having to make a commitment to a new way of being. That's not very helpful, right? So that brings us back to dancing in the rain or shuffling through the snow. I have to tell you, so back in, it was winter here, and this is what I tell my minister friends outside about how we're different here and how we don't cancel church for silly things like snow. We had a board retreat over at Sue and Ladora's house on a Saturday, and that was the week that's like, I don't know, like 6 inches overnight and another 6, and it was coming down, and nobody even thought to think, well, are we going to have the thing? Are we going to have the meeting? Like, that wouldn't happen almost anywhere else. I'm just saying. And so there's a resilience, and like, we have things to do and we're going to do it. That is inherent in who we are. And I really appreciate that. And of course, some places are not suited for dealing with that kind of snow like we are, so there's that too. But there's always chaos happening in our lives. There's always things happening in the world. And so there's not much that we can do about a lot of those things, as far as, like, we can't stop that war. Like, you can't go out and, like, just wave your magic wand and make it happen. But we do get to do is decide the energy that we put into those things. Because sometimes, I think we've probably all been there, but let's try not to see the chaos of what's going on in the world as a black hole. Meaning that we get sucked up into it, and that's it. And there's no getting out of a black hole. And you get squished too, but that's a whole nother story. So we don't want to see chaos in that way. We want to see chaos more like the gravel zone when you're going through construction. So you got to slow down a little bit. So you got to be a little more careful. But you drive it along. And even though it may seem like you've come out of the gravel zone and you're back on the regular pavement, there's still gravel for a while, right? And you still got to kind of pay attention. Things are not quite exactly how you want them to be. But it's okay because you've made it through and you're going to keep going. And this is when I'm saying these things will continue with us. We'll be thinking about and working with and dealing with the after effects of whatever chaos we're in. They'll walk with us for a while, and it's okay, because as long as we keep moving, we're going to make it through. And that's why we have the 5 all the time practices that we talked about at the beginning of the series, and that's why we stay with our spiritual practice, because the best way out is through, and the best way through is by engaging in our spiritual practices, because we can see the path more clearly when we meditate, right? And it can be hard. And here's the other thing he said. People try to think that meditation means that there's nothing going on in your brain, but I tell you something, there's still plenty going on in my brain when I meditate. And instead of fighting the chaos, Robert says, make peace with the chaos of meditation, or of the chatter, of all the stuff that's going on. And so instead of fighting it and being like, you're not supposed to be here, and putting more energy into it, just being like, okay, I notice the chaos that's happening, and I choose to return my focus back to this. It's like training a herd of puppies. Does anybody else have a herd of puppies in their brain sometimes? Because I do. It's like, okay, now we're coming back to this. Okay, we're coming back to this. That's nice. Thank you for sharing. And now we're coming back to this. And if something keeps coming up, well, there's something very interesting. Instead of turning it off, you should say, well, that's interesting. You know, maybe you keep a little notebook or a journal when you're meditating or you're doing your prayer work. If something pops up more than twice, sort of my rule, write it down. Then you've taken it out. Now you can go back. And if something pops up a couple times, write it down. Now it's, you'll be like, okay, I can deal with you later, thank you. I have been known to send myself emails to remind myself of things so I can not think about it. Like, oh, the battery for the camera at church needs to be charged before I try to record on Sunday. I'm like, oh, okay. Let me send myself an email at church so I'll see it when I get there and I have to take care of it. I mean, silly things like that. But, you know, when we do that, it just makes more room for us to see what's clear for others to see. You know, how can we take the easy things off the plate of chaos to get to the rougher parts? And that's great practice. So when we get to the rougher parts, we're ready, right? So dancing with chaos, dancing in the rain, shuffling in the snow. Let those things remind us that we are on a journey, we're in this together, to have hope that as we go through the ugly part of transformation, that we will continue to evolve, and we are evolving, and this rough part of the chemicalization is an important, necessary, and brief part of the process. So, stay prayed up.